30.
Yeah.
And I hopefully we can get through some of the material. I'm hoping this is going to let me share my screen. Oh, good. Which thing do you want to pull up first, Delia? I have parcels.
How about the aerial showing just the sort of overview of the parcels?
Okay.
Great, thank you
Yeah.
so much.
So those of you on the committee, you saw the email that Delia sent, and I felt like, you know, I could offer a couple ideas, but really getting input from more people. And I'm so glad that you're on, Mary Beth and Jennifer and Karen, so that so we can give some good advice. We do not. Oh yeah, we do have a quorum with Susan here, so we're all set. Karen, would you be willing to take minutes? I know I always call on you for stuff.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So Delia Kay is the Natural Resources Director. Is that the right title, Delia? We've been asked to give input. I want to say I'm really, really pleased to have someone reach out to us way early on in this kind of process. That's the sweet spot where we really want to be as a commission. So it's not coming in trying to fix something that didn't get done right or whatever. So, other members on the commission, do you want to quickly introduce yourselves? Mary Beth?
I'm Mary Beth Barker.
Okay.
I'm Susan Bates, and Delia and I spend hours together at different meetings.
Jennifer?
Hi, folks. I'm Jennifer Brooke. Hi, Delia. It's nice to see you here. Thanks for bringing this to our commission. Delia and I come and cross paths every time a project of ours comes before the Planning Commission in Concord. So.
Okay, and Karen?
Karen Young, member of the commission.
Okay, so Delia, let's let you take it away.
Great, thank you all so much for calling a special meeting just to talk about this and doing it on such short order. I really, really appreciate it. Some of you may have heard about this project that we're working on. We're really excited to be working with a great group of people. It's a partnership project with the Concord Housing Development Corporation, Concord Land Conservation Trust, and the Sudbury Valley Trustees to acquire 2 parcels of land that are currently owned by the Di Giovanni family. And you can see the parcels highlighted here in purple. They are 2B Upland and 406 Old Marlborough Road. So on the southern end, or the bottom part of the screen, you can see in orange is the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. And the Assabet River is to the north of the parcel. And we're currently having a survey developed right now, but we understand, so the deed is different from in terms of acreage. The deed says that the larger parcel is 5.2 acres. Our GIS estimates put it closer to 6.8. So we're going to sort of figure out what that is. But the goal of the project is to purchase both of these parcels and place 1 acre, and that would be the 406 Old Marlborough parcel, and a portion of the 2B Uplands for housing purposes, and then preserve the remainder of the land for open space purposes. On this plan, which was something that I had submitted to the state as a sort of a pre-application, I included the biomap layer, which is that stippled blue, and that is it's a planning tool that just identifies areas that are of importance for protection from an ecological biodiversity standpoint. And then maybe, Jean, if you want to show either the photographs or that graphic that I emailed you earlier today, either one of those I can speak to.
Okay, let's see.
maybe the graphic, actually, let's start with that if that's easily accessible.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I have to stop share and start again.
I know. I feel like there's a way to do it. I haven't figured it out, but I feel like there's a way to just switch between screens without having to stop and start share. But in any event, I don't know how to do that. So the green hatching. Okay, so again, just for orientation, you see the Assabet River in blue, Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. The right of way is laid out with the dark with the black boundary. But the actual rail trail itself, you can see is further from the parcel, and it's quite a narrow little strip. You know, it's a 12-foot wide strip that's encased in that thinner black line. I think everybody can see that. So the lands for protection would be the green hatch, and the land for the housing would be where the existing 2-unit duplex is at 406 Old Marlborough, as well as a portion of the 2B Upland parcel. And this, just so you guys know, I don't know how much you've been following it, but we had initially started out with more of a river walk style development of 12 units of new housing and 2 of the existing. And this is where we ended up in speaking with the neighbors and really coming to trying to find something that works for everybody in the community. So that's just, and then the other lines on this plan are showing just the wetland resource areas. Those are the different lines that you see sort of halfway through that parcel of the conservation parcel. I don't think that's probably relevant for our conversation, but we will want to keep this up because this is important to sort of talk about from the standpoint of how we get people off the Bruce Freeman. We do have a little bit of grade change, as you can see from the topography lines. There are some areas close sort of to the 406 Old Marlborough side that are a more gradual grade change that would be easier to bring people into the parcel. But I think there's a lot of opportunity to work within all of those areas to grade in ADA compliant trails. And then the photograph, if you have that, Jean, just so if you haven't walked the parcel, which it's an amazing little oasis in this densely developed neighborhood in West Concord. This is the trail that currently exists. It's an informal trail that has been used for decades by the neighborhood, and the trail is on the right. What I would like to do is, you know, from an accessibility standpoint, to widen that out. I have a question on, is that a 4-foot width? Is that a 5-foot width? What is the recommendation from your commission? And then on the left, you can see the Assabet. So as you traverse this trail, it is just a remarkable, you know, it's a bluff trail with these really nice overlooks. There are some steep grade changes in some parts of the site that would not be suitable for ADA accessible trails. I think we could look at doing assessed trails. But this bluff trail is something that I would really like to see as having a loop trail coming off the Bruce Freeman in 2 locations, so that we can have that, you know, there's lots of examples of out and back trails, as I'm sure you're all familiar with, and those are fine, but I always like trying to find loop trails when I'm hiking on conservation lands, or just, you know, hiking in general. So that would be a goal here. And when Jean and I were emailing last week, you know, I had mentioned the ADA trail, but I wanted to get your input on what other sorts of things should we be thinking about. You know, Jean, we spoke and you had mentioned, you know, benches as resting places along certain parts of the trail, which I love that idea, as well as having an overlook bench in an area that would be suitable to sort of sit and look over the Assabet, as well as on the other side of the river, there is a low-lying marshy area that's great for wildlife habitat. There's all kinds of birds that just love to, scoot around in that area. So a lot of nice opportunities for wildlife viewing, and really just hoping to hear what the commission's thoughts are on how can we make this interesting and appealing to all of our residents. And so that's it from a presentation standpoint. If there's, any questions I can answer, fire those away. But what should we be thinking about here?
I have a question. This is Mary Beth. Do you think there are any, would be any issues getting people to dismount their bikes where it's coming off the Bruce Freeman Trail? I wonder about making it so that it works for both sets of people. Because if it's people using walkers or mobility devices, you don't want the bikes whizzing by, and how do we make it compatible?
Yes, thank you. And that's an excellent question. I completely agree. And I don't think that this property would be suitable for bikes for multiple reasons, and that being one of them. So what I would like to do, because it's right next to the rail trail, is where we have those paths that come off the rail trail onto this property, we have bike we have bike racks at those locations, so that, you're welcome to come. I would like to see that we're putting in some very informal picnic areas, as well as the benches that we had, Gina and I had talked about, but that we just really make it clear that this is a pedestrian pathway. And so bike racks at both of those entrances off the rail trail.
So Mary Beth, what would your sense be if there's a bike rack, something for securing a trike as well? A sort of wider spot?
Well, it would probably, I wouldn't be in a position of securing a trike, and I'm thinking if other people might. I think if you're using a trike, it kind of indicates that if you locked it up, you probably wouldn't be comfortable walking down a trail if you're, I don't know.
True. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I might be just projecting that, because I couldn't. I would either be like, if I were going to use this, I would have to access the Bruce Freeman Trail with my wheelchair instead of my bike, so that knowing that I'm going to be going down that trail. And I don't know, other trike users that I've met are generally, I don't know, maybe people would be. So but it's not I haven't found that it's too hard to lock up your trike somewhere. It's not that, you have to have your own, lock. You have to have your own, one of those rope lock things, It works okay. It doesn't work exactly the same as a bike, but it works. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a quick question, Delia. This is Jennifer. Are you planning on, it doesn't sound like it. There's no river access, correct? This is all bluff and above, or is that right?
Mostly. There's a very small portion. Jean, I'm sorry if you wouldn't mind going back to the graphic that I sent this afternoon that shows the close-up of the two parcels.
This one?
Yep. Okay, so on the west side of the parcel, you'll see that there's this little U formed by the the buffer zone lines.
Yep, because
Um,
it looks like there's a ravine or something there, like a creek.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So that's a tiny little, I don't know if it's spring fed or what it is, but it's a tiny little tributary to the
Uh-huh.
Assabet.
Yeah,
And the trail does head down that, steep slope, and you do have, and whether it's on, I actually don't know for certain. I think that some of it is on the acquisition parcel, but more of it is on the adjacent parcel to the west. But there is
Right.
this flat area that you can access the Assabet. So I could envision that somebody could fish from that area, but
Right.
it's down a very steep slope.
right, right. This is so cool.
Yeah.
This is so cool. So a couple of things come to mind that you might want to keep in mind.
Yep.
It would be wise not to make access to the river official for the reason that if you did, you'd have to make it accessible. You can't just say, well, if you can make it down the slope, then you're good.
Right.
And I think there'd be pressure to make it a more formal and official way for everyone to get down to the river. So I think, and it sounds like a lot of that might be on the opposite side of the tributary, and it's not that might not even be an issue. But I just think if you're going to offer access to the river, you just have to be really careful about how that happens, because it's a pretty steep slope right there above
Yep.
the bank, and it would be really hard to get accessibility to the river without tearing. It would just be horrible. You can't do it, right? So
Right.
the idea of an overlook is really, really cool. I think that's awesome. And having a view to the river, if the overlook was like a deck with a handrail, or I mean, it depends on how close to the edge of the bluff you can get, but we've seen any kind of signage it could be attached to the handrail. It could be, if you're going to put signage, it should always, you have to have it in Braille as well, which is easy enough. I think those are some details, but stepping back for just a sec, there aren't that many places you can get into the woods in an accessible way, like really accessible way, like completely ADA compliant way. And being off of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, this is it could be a really unique opportunity to offer something we don't have, which is an opportunity to take a wheelchair or a stroller and come from the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, which has accessibility, to a loop path nonetheless, which is awesome, through the woods and back to the trail again. That's just the coolest thing ever. I'm not sure where you would park. You'd have to get here on foot. Like Mary Beth was just saying, it's a little tricky to figure that out. But I've worked with Audubon on sensory trail sensory trail presentations, which is, and you don't have to highlight everything, but just there's a few ways to create a space that's really not meant for bikes, and identifying it and making it a trail for everyone by giving it a name, or giving it features that aren't conducive to having mountain bikes riding through there, would be, I think, a kind of intuitive way of separating the traffic, but also creating opportunities for a different kind of natural experience in Concord. I think it's pretty cool. You can do it with actual like guide ropes and markers. You can do it with signage. It can be done with cell phone apps. There's a lot of different things to chew on when it comes to sensory trail stuff. So I don't know, it's such a great opportunity. I totally see what you mean about getting in closer to the Upper Marlboro, or to the old Marlboro Road property. That's where the grade is the least steep. And then you probably have to swing back around in that same direction to get off again. But those are my thoughts. The width of the path. Two things. The width is if it's a path that's narrow. I think all you're really required to have is 36 inches, which is too narrow. You can't pass. So if it's less than 5 feet wide, you have to have a kind of like pull out, so you can step, so a wheelchair or a person coming in the other direction can pull off to the side, and there can be a passing lane of sorts every 200 yards. But 5 feet is a good minimum dimension that we use for accessible trails and pathways, because it allows for two users going in the same direction to be next to each other. It's a deaf space dimension as well. Two people using sign language don't walk as close to each other as two people who are talking to each other and using their ears. So they need a little bit more space because they need to be able to look at each other while they're moving. So I would say 5 feet for a minimum dimension on the path. And then lastly, the path surface, that is the thing that could make this really unique and different than a lot of other paths in Concord, or that people have been on. You know, asphalt is great for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, but it's not great for being in the woods. And just a gravel path is not really accessible. So the trick is really finding a way to create a walking or mobility surface that feels like it belongs in the woods, but that is level enough and is dry enough and is fairly stable. So the path material choice would be my last comment, is something to really think through, and it'll make it successful or not at the end of the day.
Those are really helpful comments. And I have thought about the path surface.
I know,
Just because
that you have.
Yeah, but a lot of these things I haven't, so this is really helpful. But with the path surface, I feel like there are with the conservation trails, we have so many wetland issues to contend with that we don't always have the ability to have like this hard packed dirt surface trail that I think would work here, because that photograph, as you saw, that's what's out there right now. And I think there has to be some grading to meet, cross slope and longitudinal to make sure that it does meet the ADA requirements. But my hope and my belief is that given the high and dry nature of the site, that a hard packed, compacted, earthen surface would be, and you tell me, I mean, I see Jennifer, you're nodding your head with us, which is great. And, because I think that's true. I mean, we don't want to see those asphalt paths that go through the woods, and even a gravel trail. I mean, we've struggled with that in terms of ADA, because it's not, I don't think you can easily move a wheelchair through that when it's, it's kind of a little bit like going through sand, but not obviously quite as bad. But and stone dust just never seems to really work as well as we would hope it would.
I know, it always washes away. Yeah.
Right.
Packed earth, if you can remove most of the, or all of the, that's the only tricky part. You have to remove all the rocks and the roots for packed earth, but that's a great strategy. And then, when it can't be packed earth, boardwalk, even a one that's very, very, just sitting above ground works as well. But yeah, exactly. Keeping stone dust in place is a giant pain. You already know this. The National Park Service has a spec for a graded gravel path, which is better than just a gravel path. It stays put longer, and a lot of that depends on how well it's graded and how well it drains. So that's the other thing. Like, whenever water collects, you get puddles, and then the path degrades and it's not, and then it doesn't work for anybody. So so the grading is really important. And if you could do it out of packed earth, that's super cool. The issue with packed earth is that it gets rutted out if people use it when it's muddy, when it's wet. So
Right.
it's a matter of doing packed earth, but then making sure it has slope. So it's hard. There are fabrics, geotextiles, and there's things like that can help. But we found that like pine duff works really well. So if you do a packed earth and then you put down a layer of pine duff, or in some cases you can use a shredded bark mulch too, which forms a mat. It's not like a nugget. You want something that's kind of going to lock together and create a surface. So those are options that are a little bit less egregious than stone dust or
Right.
some of those other things.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Can I ask you about the sensory trail?
Mhm.
Just from the commission's sense, or you mentioned guide ropes, and I will say that I'm a little hesitant about guide ropes, and I'll tell you why. Because this is a neighborhood trail, or it's located in a densely developed residential area. I've used ropes. So at White Pond, actually, when I first started, I had put in some rope fencing to keep people on the trails. And those ended up being rope swings for people to fly into White Pond. So I didn't have a whole lot of success with that. So I'm a little reluctant about that, but I wonder about the cell phone apps, if you can sort of elaborate on that a little bit, or tell me what you think about the.
Excuse me, Susan, I know you have to go.
Yeah, I have to go. I didn't mean to interrupt the flow there, but thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Susan.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Susan.
Okay, so we're below quorum. We can't make any decisions, but that's not the purpose of this meeting tonight anyway. It's really just offering some ideas and guidance for Delia.
Yeah. Delia, I totally get the rope swing thing. So we've done a couple different ways. I know over at Drumlin Farm, for example, they use an actual split rail fence, and then they put signage on the fence. That can be tricky because split rail fences aren't really finger friendly. If you're low vision, it's not a great way to get from point A to point B because you'll get splinters and all that other kind of good stuff. So when I was saying cell phone apps, there's opportunities for locations, either beacons or QR codes, so that you can go to a place and then you can get information, and that information can direct you to listen to or to your right or things like that. In front of you, or smells, whatever it might be. Sensory trails, I feel like the ones that are out there are experimental to some extent, and I don't some of them have good ideas that are worth stealing, and a lot of them don't. So I think sensory trails really need to come back to just making a meaningful experience in the woods, right, in this place. So if that just means having a place to sit and listen, and just being reminded that it's a good place to sit and listen, or having the opportunity to take in a view and do it in a way that is, intimate, right? So that you're not really far away from the edge, or you're not really far away from the trees, and that things don't become, I think in the world of ADA, things become very sterile very quickly because of all of the rules and all of the dimensional requirements. And so it doesn't have to be all along the trail. At least this is my personal opinion. It just has to be in a few places where you get to have a moment that you wouldn't have, say, on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail.
Right.
So I don't know if
Thank you.
that's very helpful, but it's
Super helpful.
It's a different speed, it's a different scale. Materiality of the benches, for example. What if the benches were made out of the same exact material that the trees. So if you had oak trees, maybe you have an oak bench, and then you say, okay, well, this is an oak bench, and just know that there are oak trees all around you. Here's the, I don't know, I'm just ad-libbing here. I just think that there's opportunities for a few things that could make it special.
So maybe I hope you won't mind if I poach some of these ideas to put into the grant application. I love, what I was thinking with benches was, the Walden Pond Reservation a couple of years ago, they redid, and they have done such amazingly nice work with the wood that they used. And I would hope, I think it was all locally sourced as well.
So do you know the benches over there, Delia? We use the same wood at Ripley. That's, we call that harbor. Those are harbor logs. So those are all logs that were pulled out of Boston Harbor, and they were brought here from the South. They're all Southern live oak, and they were brought here for the shipbuilding industry back in the 1800s. And then any logs that weren't used or ships that got pulled apart because they weren't put out to sea, they just basically put all that stuff into the harbor. And then because it sat in the harbor for so long, it hardened the wood. And so a couple, many years ago now, because I'm getting old, they started pulling that stuff out of the water. And there's a couple of folks, vendors who bought that all up, who bought that wood all up. And that's where they got that wood. It's extraordinary. It's super cool. It's still out there. You can still get it for benches and things like that. They used it down at the Spalding Hospital's new space as well, because they're it's super tactile, right?
Yes.
Pretty cool. Yeah, it's really cool.
So maybe offline you can email me the vendors so that I can.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Sure.
Yep. So is it, I mean, can I put into my application that we would look at using harbor logs? Because
Yeah.
that's still out there. Okay. Great.
Yeah, it's definitely still out there.
Cool.
Karen, we want to give you a chance to chime in on this.
I think you have wonderful ideas. I'm like visually challenged, just like that's not how I think. So can you just, where would the loop piece of the path come in as looking at the graphic? Can you just clarify that a little more?
So if you look at the graph, I don't think that I can point. Am I able to?
I might be able to.
Okay. So if you go down, keep going left down the trail, stop right about, come back up a little, right about there, maybe a little further down, further left. See where those two vertical lines come, keep going. Go left a tiny little bit. So I would think you come somewhere up there and then you sort of wend your way through the Bruce Freeman right of way. And then you come into the, then you jump into the parcel there. And then you would go sort of up the, you'd sort of go along that way. You wouldn't quite go down that far because it's quite steep there. But you would go straight to the river, just about, and stop about there.
Okay.
Now you're upslope again. So come back a tiny bit upslope. Yep, but then you would exactly do a loop. Now you're going along the river. And then I think that you could then pop back out right there, come back onto the Bruce Freeman. And you see right where you did that, Jean, there's those steep topography lines right there. Those close together lines right next to the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. But I feel like there's enough room there within the Bruce Freeman right of way that we could grade in and make that ADA compliant. So that's sort of the loop trail that I was thinking. We're having a survey done right now. It's not complete yet, but there is a trail that runs along that southern boundary that's within the interior of the property itself. So I would hope that you do a full loop within the property, but you'd also have the ability to come in and out at two locations.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. Is that steep part that that's the existing trail that comes down into the rail trail now, where people walk their dogs all the time? Yeah, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, I was just wondering, that is quite steep there.
Yeah.
But it is a well-used path, so I like, I love the idea of being able to explore it personally. So I think if we can make it accessible, it will be very well received and well used.
I think
Yeah.
it will be too. I just think there's such, you know, the majority of that site is very flat. You know,
Mhm.
it has not significant grade changes throughout the majority of it. So I think it lends itself really well to, you know, a fully accessible trail. And then I guess a question that I would have, you know, we did an assessed trail in the upper town forest, you know, Brister's Hill area several years ago with Harry Byers' assistance, and Mary Beth, you were involved in that
Yeah,
as well. But, you know, we don't have, that area is relative, I mean, there's some ruts and roots and there are some grade changes that can be challenging. Can you do an assessed trail that would take you down to the river's edge? It's so steep, I mean, it's really steep, and I don't think it's, I mean, I think you'd have to be like an Olympian wheelchair user to get down that slope and not go careening down it, or to be able to get yourself back up. You'd have to be
right.
a strong, you know, person pushing you up and taking you down. But can you make that assessed?
Are you asking
that-
me personally if I could do that? No, I don't think I would try that. I think, like you say, I'd probably careen down and then I wouldn't have anywhere to get back up. Yeah, I wouldn't feel safe on that. But
Well, I would really hope to get, you know, as we move forward with this project, and assuming we'll know by hopefully by town meeting whether we're successful in the acquisition, but I would really want to work with the commission on making sure that as we're thinking about this, you know, because the acquisition is one thing and that's all we're focused on right now. But
yeah,
then when we get into the actual, you know, how we make this land usable to our community, I want it to be something that I just think there's so many opportunities here that would make it something for everybody. So this has been very educational for me. So keep these ideas coming if you have more while I have you.
I have another question.
Oh,
So about how long would the trail be? Is it a mile? Is it a half mile? What's the?
I don't know. Let me just see if I can just quickly kind of just sketch out what that might be if we were to do, this is going to be a real ballpark,
Yeah,
but if it was an interior trail, it's about 1,800 feet. So about that's about a quarter mile.
okay.
do you anticipate, I know this is not in our purview for this commission, but do you anticipate there being any pushback because of the disruption to the wildlife itself and the amount of, you know, trees that might have to come down, or because I think just in my brief observation, I walk the rail trail a lot. There is considerable wildlife in there. So I didn't know if that would come up as another concern at some point.
I mean, I think that's a great question. Because, you know, this is let's say a 6-acre parcel of land in, you know, a densely developed neighborhood or medium density neighborhood. It is a sort of oasis for wildlife.
Mhm.
So if you put in a 5-foot wide trail, I think it's disruptive at the time of construction. But then it really comes down to the amount of users using it, you know, so I don't see that it would be long-term a disruption. you're going to lose some trees probably. But years ago, when I was in private consulting, we did a study to understand the effects of a rail trail actually on it was on wood duck in particular, because somebody had raised that as a concern. They're fairly secretive and elusive. And so we walked a section of the Blackstone River Rail Trail. This was so long ago. And there was a family of wood duck on the other side, no, on the trail side of the river. And they only, and there were people, you know, with strollers, and there were cyclists, and it was a well-traveled section of the rail trail. And I was with my other birder friend, consultant, and we saw the wood duck and we stopped. And the wood duck only moved from that really heavily traveled section of the rail trail to the other side of the river when we stopped and said, hey, look, there's some wood duck down there, a mother, a hen with chicks, you know. So wildlife are, I mean, they're adaptable. I was at the White Pond beach site today, the construction site, and there were titmice and there were woodpeckers, and you know, there's excavators and all kinds of equipment going. So yes, I think there is concern, and I share that concern just as, you know, as a wildlife biologist. But I don't think that what we're talking about here with, you know, a maximum 5-foot wide trail would be in the long term disruptive to wildlife.
Okay. Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other comments, thoughts, ideas? Okay, well, Delia, it sounds like everyone here has given you some great input for your grant proposal, and certainly I wish you great luck with that. And
Thank you, too.
hopefully it will be successful. And
Yes.
and you know, we're more than happy to continue to work with you as this whole process unfolds.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I really, again, I just so appreciate that you all took the time to meet with me on short notice and give me this really amazing feedback. I feel like I've learned a lot. So thank you.
Good.
Thank you. It's a wonderful project. It sounds so exciting.
It
Yeah.
does. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I will just put in a plug. The Land Trust and SBT are furiously fundraising both for the acquisition as well as for stewardship and ADA. So yes. So if you hear about the fundraising opportunities or you want to reach out to them, they are actively fundraising for the acquisition and stewardship.
Great.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Thanks so much.
Mary
Great
Beth,
night.
Jennifer, Karen, thank you all for coming tonight and offering great suggestions and ideas. I really appreciate it. And good luck, Delia. And I'm sure
Thank you.
we'll talk again.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.